What's going on, everybody? This is Bronco Juggalo, and today I'm coming at you from an undisclosed location. We are doing part 5 of our NightMare on Elm Street series. Today we are reviewing The Dream Child. The Dream Child starred, once again, Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. It brings back our final girl from part 4, Lisa Wilcox, as Alice. And it is directed by Stephen Hopkins. Interesting side note here, Stephen Hopkins is actually responsible for 2 movies that I actually like quite a bit, aside from this film. And a lot of people might think he's not a very well-known director, but he actually did Predator 2, and he did A Ghost in the Darkness, which are 2 films that I personally really like. So we're going to jump right into the synopsis, and then we're going to go over the pros and cons of this film. Our story starts with Alice and her boyfriend, who is and it was also from the 4th movie, Dan. They are making love. Alice starts having visions again of Freddy Krueger, but it's while she is awake, and she doesn't know why. Visions of Freddy are coming at her. She's basically slipping into daydreams. While she's awake, she's going back into the dream world. She has no idea what's going on. She believes Freddy is dead, but she knows it's coming back. She ends up finding out that she is pregnant. And in the story, she finds out that Freddy is coming back through her child's dreams, her unborn child's dreams. As in the movie, it states, and I don't know if this is true or not, or something they just made up for the movie, that an unborn fetus dreams 70% of its time in the womb. So, it is actually going at her through her unborn son, which she decides to name Jacob because he's called Jacob in the visions she's having. This movie also brings in a bit of a new story element, a story element that was somewhat introduced in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. It talks about Freddy's birth, and it kind of compares the two. It shows the parallels between Freddy's birth and Alice's pregnancy. So we get to see a lot more of the backstory now of how Freddy came to be as a person, and his mother, Amanda Krueger. How she was a nun who worked in an insane asylum, who was locked over the weekend or over the holiday with 100 different maniacs, and they repeatedly raped her. As she's trying to fight and kill Freddy, she finds out that Amanda Krueger, Freddy's mother, is actually still stuck in the world, in the real world, in spiritual form, trapped somewhere in the world. So she puts herself into the dream world, and she goes after Freddy, while she sends one of her friends to go after and find Amanda Krueger in the real world. Amanda Krueger gets found. She dies. Her spirit is released. It's released from its torment. It's released from its pain. Amanda Krueger comes into the dream world and ends up destroying, at least for about 10 seconds, Freddy Krueger. Because by the time when the movie is ending, when the dream is ending, it shows multiple doors getting slammed, and those doors breaking open, with Freddy popping out, the gloved hand popping out of Amanda, showing that he will be coming back. And of course, the movie ends with them all thinking, oh, he's gone, it's okay, and she has her baby. And once again, she is the final girl. That's the basic synopsis of this film. This movie catches a lot of hate from Nightmare on Elm Street fans. Myself personally, I really enjoy this movie. I like this movie so much. I thought it was 10 steps better than 4. It still steps down from 3, but it's a big step up from 4, which I truly just found to be boring. I wasn't expecting a lot from this movie, and it delivered for me. Now, there is a lot of bad stuff in this movie. There's a lot of things that are cons in this movie, but it works for me. I like that it's kind of bad in a way. I like that it's a little cheesy. So we're going to go into our pros section of this film. I was getting ready for this ranking, or getting ready for this review, and I at first had this actually in the cons, but then I kind of switched it over to the pros, as I watched it again, and I remember how much I liked them. One of the pros in this movie for me is the secondary characters. You have Dan, you have Greta, you have Mark, and you have Yvonne. Those are her 4 friends. Her father returns in this movie. He's no longer an alcoholic like he was in 4. And he's trying to help her out as well. But he doesn't really get the whole Freddy thing. But he's trying to be a good dad and support her as best he can. The characters, they actually do build their personalities. We get to learn a little bit about each of these characters, which is something in 4 was non-existent. All the other characters were just throwaways. Aside from the few characters that remained from Part 3, all of the new characters, including Alice herself, were kind of throwaway characters. Even Alice was not that interesting. It wasn't until the end of the movie where she started taking traits on from the other characters that she kind of became interesting. These characters, you actually do kind of get to know them a little bit, and to me, you kind of do care when they die. So, going into my second pro of this movie is the kills. I love the kills in this film. One in particular, Dan, who is Alice's boyfriend, he can't get into his truck. He can't find his keys. There's a motorcycle sitting right there that happens to have the key in it. And he jumps on the bike and he's speeding through traffic. This guy's flying. And then all of a sudden, the bike starts to morph. And the bike starts to change and it starts to infuse into his body. And it starts to rip away his skin. And cables start going into him and, fuel injectors and everything starts going into his body. And it fuses him to almost where he looks almost like, if you were to imagine a biker Cenobite, that's basically kind of what he looks like. And it's a beautifully shot. It's awesome. The prosthetics they used to make this look so good were beautiful. It shows great practical effects, and with the little bit of CGI they used on it, or the little bit of computer effects, it was done so well. It's a beautiful, beautiful kill. Absolutely love it. There is a bit of a downside to the kills in this film, and I think, once again, this is because around this time, the MPAA was kind of sticking their noses in horror movies and trying to tone things down. A lot of the kills aren't very gory when Dan actually dies. Now, all that stuff, as cool as it is, when he dies, what happens is he wakes up, he's still in his truck, and he goes head-on with a semi. We don't see his body getting ripped apart or anything like that. We see him in the crash car, after that with some blood on him, and he dies. So it goes from being this really cool, awesome dream kill, which is still an awesome kill, one of my favorites in the entire franchise, to him just be laying there in the truck with the blood on him. Some of the CGI effects are very dated. It looks very cheesy. Like when Mark gets killed, Mark's a comic book nerd and he changes himself into this comic book character in his dream. And Freddy turns him into a comic page and starts cutting at him because the MPA was sticking their big noses in to try to tone things down, which I somewhere bet you anything that Tipper Gore is responsible for. She tried to go after heavy metal. She probably tried to go after horror movies too. Fucking bitch. Anyways, sorry. A little bit of a rant there. When Freddy kills Mark, he turns Mark into basically a piece of comic book paper. And he starts slashing him. So the slashes rip Mark apart. We don't get to see any blood. We just see bits of like confetti paper falling to the ground. And then you see Mark's arm hanging with blood coming down it. You really don't see a bloody, disgusting kill. It's still a cool kill, but it's not a bloody kill. My problem with the kill is because of the CGI, I thought it looked a little cheesy. It looks very 1980s. It just didn't have that oomph that it could have had if they would have maybe put it as a more like him slicing up the character as Mark instead of as a piece of paper. So, but overall, the kills are pretty good in this film. It's decent. I really enjoy them. And actually, I think this may be Freddy's lowest kill count. He only kills 3 people in this movie. I'm not sure, but that might be his lowest kill count in this series. The set designs. I enjoyed the set designs in this movie very much. I love the old Gothic-looking asylum. I recently said in a video that asylums are my favorite horror setting. I love the way asylums look. And the dream, when they're in the asylum, in the dreams, I love the way it looks. Especially this asylum with the chains hanging off the walls. And all the maniacs just running around nuts. and it just looking dirty and grungy. It's definitely not up to code today, but I really enjoy it. It's a big contrast to some other more cleanly films, like, and I also love this one in Cult of Chucky. I love that asylum, and I love how white it is and sterile looking it is because it makes everything pop. But it is a very different look in this film. It's very grungy, very dirty. I also love the church scenes where they're in the chapel of the asylum in the dream, and like when Freddy is becoming Freddy, when he's being resurrected or whatever, however you want to say it, and this big stained glass window with the cross blows out behind him because, of course, the symbolism being that Freddy is too evil for that cross to be there, you know. But the set designs are beautiful. Everything in this movie was just beautifully done. I think from the set designs to the locations, it all looks very good. Even the recreation of Nancy's house in the dream world looks good. The inside, if you look, everything's in the proper place, and it looks really decent. It all looks destroyed, it looks run down, it looks dilapidated, but it looks good. Okay, I kind of covered over the effects in some of the kill scenes, and I thought the effects with like Dan and his kill were very good. But aside from that scene, I do have to say one of my cons in this film is the effects on a lot of the other shots. As I said, the special effects when it came to Mark's death, very cheesy, very bad looking. It did not look good. The computer effects really held this movie back in those spots. All of the practical effects in this movie look very good. It's the CGI effects that are totally pulling away from this film. The CGI effects look so dated. They're worse than the ones in 4. They're way worse than the ones in 3. And I don't know what happened. I don't know if the budget was cut a little bit for this film, and they just couldn't, or they just had a really terrible effects person on it. Another big con for me in this film is how 80s it is. And sometimes, okay, I like the 80s. I kind of grew up a little bit in the 80s as a child. You know, 1 through 10 was kind of mostly in the 80s for me. I really enjoyed the 80s. I like the 80s. I love a lot of 80s movies. When I say this movie is very 1980s and that's a bad thing, think 16 Candles. Think, you know, Pretty in Pink. That kind of 1980s. The style, the crappy style, the music, the, you know, not the good music. I'm not talking about like metal and stuff like that. I'm talking about like the new wave poppy music. It's that kind of 1980s crap. It's that kind of 1980s suck. And one of the biggest case in points to that for me is Freddy fucking Krueger skateboarding. I fucking was like, are you fucking serious? When I saw this movie for the first time when I was younger, maybe, I don't know how old I was when I first saw this one. Maybe 12? Even at 12 years old, I'm sitting there thinking, why is Freddy on a skateboard? It's not funny. It's not scary. Freddy on a skateboard is neither funny nor scary. It's just kind of stupid. Another big con for me for part 5 of this movie, For the Dream Child, is that this movie, along with part 4, is kind of where the series, the entire franchise, took that turn from being more of a serious film. Even 2, with all the problems 2 has, 2 is still a pretty serious film. But in parts 4, not as much as now into 5. 5 does turn this movie very much into the camp Freddy, into the not as serious Freddy, into the very funny Freddy. And don't get me wrong, I like funny Freddy, but I like my funny Freddy to be more like in part 3, where it's funny but it's still sinister as hell. One other thing that I want to say about this movie, and it's something I try to mention in most of these, I try to give my favorite Freddy line. And I'm going to be honest with you, in this particular movie, there's really not any very memorable Freddy lines. So there are a couple good, decent lines, but I really just didn't feel there was any outstanding lines. There was no, "Welcome to prime time, bitch." There's no, "You are all my children now." But there is, as my buddy here pointed out, a line where Freddy says, while Dan is being killed, I'm going to see if I can do it in the voice a little. This boy has a need for speed. Not that memorable from Freddy, which is something that I do consider a con in this movie, because I really want Freddy to have that, especially one really good line. But there is one line that I kind of like, and it's where Freddy is fading back into the smoke, and he has his glove up like this. And he says, "We'll see, bitch. We'll see." But that was pretty much it. Honestly, it's not the best line that he's ever uttered. It's not a terrible line. But as I was watching this movie, I was really thinking, what am I going to pick for my favorite line? And I really couldn't find one. So those two are going to be, let's just call them honorable mentions. So that's it for my review, guys. I want to take a special moment and introduce you to a friend of mine who's going to be joining me on some future reviews. He goes by the name of Bill. Come on over, Bill. Come say hello.
Well, hello. I'm Bill. I'm going to be doing the Friday the 13th when he gets to it.
Which will be coming to you soon after we finish up the NightMare On Elm Street reviews and a couple lists I've got. I've got my top 10 horror movie lists coming, and I have my top live-action Batman movies coming.
Well,
so I look forward to those. Thanks, appreciate that. Anyways, guys, that is Bill. I'm Bronco Juggalo.